Hello again. In this video, we're going to look at the process for creating this image of an owl that I recently published. This is based on a photo as a reference. The photo is not a direct replication of the photo, but I referenced it to create this sketch. And then I changed this sketch slightly because around the eyes, I thought there wasn't enough light. So I just brightened up the colors and reduced the black color areas. So this is this sketch in Photoshop after I finished it and was happy with what I had. And the matter now was to first I would want to use the pico palette because I just really like that color palette, which is just 16 colors. And then all the work that I was going to be doing here would be cleanup, right? So I was figuring out what colors to use in certain areas, and I wanted to get this layering effect, especially on the feathers around the eyes. I wanted the feathers to radiate in, to really draw the attention onto the eyes. And right now what I'm doing is I'm playing around with color contrast and see whether or not some of these colors will work. By splitting the masses of color into slightly different sized clusters, you can kind of create the idea of separate feathers that are all radiating from the eye. And although I'm using some weird colors here, I want the eyes to pop out, to be brighter. So instead of actually having the feathers follow the photo reference, which is their pretty much flat color, I make them slightly darker as they get closer to the eyes. That way, when you look at the eyes, they're surrounded by a way darker color, which increases the contrast, making the eyes really look brighter than they actually are, just by contrast. And as I'm moving out, radiating out, I'm brightening the tips of the feathers, but as well I'm darkening the shadows in between the feathers, which creates this sort of flat gradation, but it gives the feathers relief in relation to each other. I was just moments ago on the top of the screen, I was creating, I was explaining, I think during the stream, the concept of texture perspective, in which if you have the same texture spread across an object, which in this case is like the owl is a bit like a pill shape, like a capsule. What you would get would be that texture to compress visually as it gets closer to the edges. So you can suggest shape or volume on an object without shading, as long as you can sell the idea that the texture is wrapping around the object. And that's what we're kind of trying to do with smaller and smaller feathers as we get close to the edge of the owl. Now, this image is symmetrical. Of course, in real life, owls are approximately symmetrical, but not really. But because this is kind of more like an image and more like a, like a visual icon rather than a depiction of reality, I kind of try and keep things symmetrical because it saves me basically half the time. I'm also replicating the same effect here with feathers. Now, again, I'm departing from the reference because owls don't really have the feathers flat like that on the screen. But again, this is a graphic depiction. This is sort of more like graphics design rather than a faithful replication of the photo. I'm creating, again, the layering effect, not only to suggest the texture and the wrapping of the shape of the owl, but also to kind of add some vignetting effect to the image as the colors get darker as they move closer to the corners. These elements here on the center of the body, just underneath the beak. Is it a beak? Is it a peck? I think pecks are like for chicken, but a beak. I think I make those colors, those gray spots there, just kind of to not have them straight into black. Adding this yellow here for transition, it kind of lit that bit up, and not because the bright cream color on the palette wasn't bright enough, but because the yellow one was very saturated. And usually when you lighten a certain color up, it becomes slightly more saturated. If you want to light up red, you're not going to use white. That's just going to make pink. So what you want to do is you want to add orange and then yellow, because it lightens it up both in value but also in saturation, giving it sort of a vibrant feel, a lit feel. And so that's why the eyes in the owl pop out so much in this case. but as well that under bit there kind of makes it almost like shine or have this kind of self illumination effect. Now here on the head, top of the head, forehead of the owl, I have no idea what it's called, but the owl I think is the only bird that has front-facing eyes, which is why they usually say that the owl is one of the smartest birds out there, which is not really true. It's more the crow is the smarter one. But the front-facing makes it so, such a almost like hypnotic animal or hypnotic features. One of my favorite animals is actually the owl. So on the forehead, we kind of have that same effect of the texture perspective, meaning that the feathers are probably all the same size, but I get to see more of the full length of the front feather rather than the back ones, because the back ones, they're sort of turning away, they're tilting away from me. So I have to make the feathers at the top shorter. And by doing that, I can kind of get that feel of perspective. Think about it almost like treads on a tire. As you look at the tire from the front view, not from the rim view, but from the front view where you can see the treads, you can actually see that the treads sort of group together as you get closer to the top. And that's kind of the effect that I want to get here. Just again, to simulate to give it a sense of texture and a sense of volume as well. Now, I'm going to experiment a little bit with the background, but honestly, none of the backgrounds kind of does anything for me. I think it would probably require me to go out of the Pico 8 palette, and honestly, none of them is really doing anything for me. So I tried a few different things, and I think at some point I try a paisley pattern based on like one of those, usually associated with rock scarves. For some reason, I'm explaining how I do my outline effect, which is just cloning pixels left, right, up, and down using the Alt key. And you can kind of see how I can do like a projection and a volume really quickly. Like this is how you do a cylinder really quickly just by projecting pixels upwards. So I'm trying the green. The green on the Pico 8 palette is absolutely gorgeous. Great green there. But yeah, it just turns out to be noise. Doesn't really add anything to the image. Plus, it's a very constricted image. The canvas is really touching the central focus, which is the owl head. So there's not a lot of room for doing anything that won't look off. So I decide eventually to just leave it as is. And by the end of the stream, I kind of decided instead I want to make the background black and add a rim light to the horns of the horned owl. This is the horned owl, which is my favorite type of owl, even though I think all owls are awesome. And here I'm cleaning up some of the noisiness left behind from the original sketch. The original sketch was done fairly quick, and it was done with my variant thickness pixel brush. And I just basically try to replicate the reference. I mean, if you take the photo reference and overlay it, you'll probably find like the eyes are too small or too big or something like that, because I really didn't use it all that much. I was more focused on coloring and pattern placement rather than anything else. So here, adding the background and just having the lights on the horns just made it, I think it made it look better than having a different colored background. So here it is completed. Hope you guys enjoy this, and I hope you guys learned something. So take care.